The room is dim, shadows stretching along the walls, and the only sound is the quiet, uneven rhythm of a heart beating in frustration. A figure paces back and forth, eyes fixed on the mirror, yet seeing a reflection that feels foreign, even hostile. Every movement, every thought seems heavy, as if life itself is resisting them. The tension is palpable, a constant war waged not against circumstances, but against the self. This is the invisible battle most people fight daily, the relentless, exhausting struggle to become who they think they should be, rather than accepting who they truly are. From the outside, life seems simple. Society tells us that success is linear, that happiness is earned through discipline, control, and relentless effort. Yet inside, the mind churns with doubt, shame, and frustration. We tell ourselves, I'm not enough. I must fix this, correct that, push harder. But paradoxically, it is this very effort, this unending resistance, that keeps life from moving. It is a trap. The harder we fight ourselves, the more stuck we become. The mind often confuses struggle with progress. We wear busyness as a badge of honor, measure our worth by how much we can control, and mistake internal conflict for motivation. In truth, the internal war is exhausting, invisible, and unrelenting. We fight impulses that naturally rise within us, repress emotions we deem inappropriate, and scold ourselves for failing to match some idealized self-image. Every judgment, every attempt to micromanage our own psyche creates friction. Life slows, energy drains, and clarity becomes elusive. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny, suppress, or despise. These hidden aspects, if resisted, grow stronger, manifesting as anxiety, self-sabotage, or chronic dissatisfaction. Nietzsche urged us to embrace contradictions, to accept the chaos within as necessary for growth. Yet most of us act as though ignoring our shadows or forcing them away will free us. In reality, the opposite happens. The harder we resist, the more life seems to resist back. Imagine standing at the edge of a river trying to push it upstream. The water does not bend to your will. It resists, flows against, and erodes you with every futile effort. Fighting oneself is much the same. Every attempt to control thought, emotion, and instinct creates an undercurrent of tension that keeps us from moving forward. We mistake this resistance for external obstacles, blaming circumstances, other people, or society, when in truth, the battle rages inside. And yet, there is a subtle truth hidden beneath this struggle. There is a space within the chaos, a quiet current beneath the turbulence, where life can flow effortlessly. It exists beyond effort, beyond judgment, beyond the need to constantly correct or control. The challenge lies in stepping out of the war with oneself, in pausing the fight, and allowing the natural rhythm of being to guide movement. This does not mean surrendering to passivity, but aligning with reality rather than resisting it. In these quiet moments, when resistance softens, a strange clarity emerges. Thoughts lose their urgency. The body relaxes. The mind, long tense and restless, begins to breathe. The internal landscape, once a battlefield, starts to resemble something familiar, something welcoming. It is in this subtle shift that the first movement of life begins, small, almost imperceptible, yet profound. This is the paradox of the human experience. Life moves not when we push hardest, but when we cease fighting ourselves. The moment we stop resisting our own nature, stop criticizing every impulse or mistake, we discover motion, clarity, and possibility. The war ends not with victory over oneself, but with acceptance, a quiet acknowledgement of what is, of who we are, and of what life truly asks of us. By recognizing the futility of self-conflict, we open a door to transformation. The tension that once held us captive can become a source of insight, a mirror reflecting what we must face and embrace. And as this realization sinks in, a reflective quiet fills the mind. Perhaps the chains we feel have never been external. Perhaps they were always forged from within, by the very struggle we now begin to release. The mirror no longer feels alien. The reflection, once hostile, now holds a trace of understanding, a hint of calm acceptance. This is not perfection nor complete resolution, but a first step, a gentle release of the tension that has weighed down life for far too long. It is here, in this delicate shift from resistance to acceptance, that the cinematic story of change begins, preparing the mind for a deeper journey into the core of self, where the true nature of life's movement awaits discovery. The moment we step back from the relentless internal struggle, We begin to notice patterns we were too busy to see before. The mind, constantly at war with itself, creates stories, illusions, and conflicts that feel real but are largely self-imposed. Every worry about the future, every regret about the past, every pang of self-criticism is a reflection of the resistance within. It is as though we are architects of invisible prisons, building walls with our own thoughts and judgments, confining ourselves in cells of tension, fear, and doubt. Carl Jung called these unseen walls the shadow, parts of ourselves we deny, disown, or despise. The shadow can take many forms: anger we refuse to feel, desires we fear to admit, weaknesses we pretend don't exist. When we fight these aspects, when we attempt to erase or control them, they gain power. They manifest as procrastination, anxiety, self-sabotage, and emotional paralysis. Nietzsche, in his exploration of human nature, suggests that embracing contradictions, rather than denying them, is a path to true strength. The conflict we feel is often a sign that we are resisting our own complexity, that we are trying to simplify a soul that is inherently multifaceted. Imagine walking through a dense forest blindfolded, trying to force a straight path while ignoring the terrain beneath your feet. The rocks, roots, and uneven ground create resistance, and the harder you push, the more likely you are to stumble. This is how resistance within ourselves manifests in life. The more we try to force thoughts, emotions, or outcomes to align with an idealized image of ourselves, the more we trip over the obstacles we refuse to acknowledge. The solution is not to fight the forest, but to learn to move with it, to notice where the ground rises and falls, and to step consciously with acceptance rather than force. Viktor Frankl, in his profound reflections on meaning, emphasizes that suffering is inevitable, but what gives life purpose is how we respond to it. Fighting ourselves is a futile attempt to avoid suffering, a denial of the reality that life, and our own nature, is imperfect. By ceasing the internal struggle, by observing our thoughts and feelings without judgment, we begin to understand that resistance is often illusionary. Life does not need our permission to flow. It waits for us to stop resisting so that we can move alongside it. The mind thrives on control, yet control is often an illusion. Our attempts to manage every aspect of our inner world create tension, anxiety, and stagnation. Alan Watts illustrates this beautifully through his teachings on flow. The more we attempt to grasp, the more life eludes us. True movement comes not from force, but from alignment. When we stop fighting ourselves, when we release the need to correct, perfect, or control, we open a space for natural momentum. Thoughts begin to settle, emotions find equilibrium, and clarity emerges from the chaos. Internal resistance is also closely tied to identity. We cling to who we believe we are, to the narratives that define us, and resist anything that threatens that perception. But identity is not a fixed object. It is a fluid process, an ongoing story in which we are both the protagonist and the observer. By acknowledging this fluidity, we loosen the grip of resistance. We stop punishing ourselves for failing to be who we should be and begin to accept who we are in this moment. In this exploration, contrasts emerge: the struggle between the internal and external, between who we think we should be and who we actually are, between effort and surrender. These contrasts illuminate a crucial truth. The friction we experience is not caused solely by life or circumstances, but by the war within. The external world often mirrors the internal. Chaos outside is amplified by chaos within, and peace outside is reflected in inner alignment. To move through life with clarity and ease, we must first reconcile these internal contradictions. Cinematic examples can make this insight tangible. Picture a person standing at the edge of a bustling city street, anxiety twisting their stomach, thoughts racing, trying to force clarity in the chaos. As they pause, breathe, and observe rather than react, the noise remains, but their perception shifts. The street is still crowded, the traffic still honks, yet the tension begins to dissolve. They are no longer fighting the environment or themselves. They are moving with it. This mirrors the psychological shift that occurs when we stop resisting our own minds. The struggle remains, but it no longer dictates our motion. Integration of shadow aspects is another key theme. When we confront and accept the parts of ourselves we've resisted, the energy previously spent in conflict is freed. Anger becomes insight, fear becomes guidance, and doubt becomes curiosity. Life begins to move because the mind is no longer a battlefield. Resistance is transformed into a flow of energy that propels us forward. Philosophical references reinforce this. Nietzsche's idea of amor fati encourages us to love and embrace all aspects of life, even the unpleasant, because each facet contributes to growth. Acceptance of the self is acceptance of life itself. The journey through internal resistance also requires observing patterns without judgment. Many of our struggles are repetitive, old wounds, recurring anxieties, familiar self-criticisms. By noticing these patterns, we begin to separate our identity from our resistance. The realization dawns: we are not our resistance. We are the observer, the consciousness that witnesses the struggle. This awareness creates a subtle but powerful shift, like a river finding a smoother channel, allowing life to flow with greater ease and less turbulence. The final realization of this section is paradoxical yet essential. Effort to force movement often hinders it, yet awareness, acceptance, and gentle alignment ignite momentum. By understanding the mechanisms of self-resistance, the audience is prepared for the next stage, the transformative moment when life begins to move, not because we push, but because we stop opposing the natural rhythm of being. The stage is set for a cinematic depiction of release, flow, and profound insight, where surrender is not defeat but liberation. The moment comes quietly, almost imperceptibly. A pause in the storm of thoughts, a breath held and released. The struggle that has dominated life begins to ease, not through effort, but through surrender. The cinematic scene opens with a figure standing alone in a vast open landscape, perhaps a cliff overlooking a slow river at dawn, or a quiet street after rain. The tension in their shoulders dissolves as they finally stop pushing against themselves, and in that stillness, life begins to move. This transformation is not instantaneous, yet the shift is palpable. The internal battle fades, revealing a rhythm beneath the chaos, a current that has always been present but was drowned out by resistance. As Alan Watts might describe, the person stops swimming upstream against the relentless river of their own mind. Instead, they float, guided by the flow, noticing that movement requires no force. Cinematic close-ups capture the subtle changes. Eyes soften, jaw unclenches, and a small smile begins to form, hinting at recognition. This is the self, not as an enemy, but as an ally. Every action taken now carries clarity and intention. Tasks that once felt burdensome or impossible are approached with calm focus. Decisions are made not from anxiety or compulsion, but from alignment with inner truth. Nietzsche's teaching of amor fati resonates here. Embracing one's fate, including one's fears, flaws, and past mistakes, transforms them into fuel for forward motion. The tension between control and surrender resolves. Paradoxically, freedom emerges from letting go. Cinematic metaphors deepen the emotional impact. Imagine a tree in the midst of a storm, its branches once rigid with resistance, now bending with the wind. The roots remain firm, anchored, but the movement is effortless. So too is the person who has ceased fighting themselves, grounded, yet flexible, responsive, yet unburdened. The narrative contrasts the chaos of past struggle with the serenity of this newfound alignment, highlighting the stark difference between forcing movement and allowing it. This moment is also profoundly psychological. By ceasing internal conflict, the energy previously wasted on resistance is redirected. Emotional paralysis gives way to initiative. Self-doubt transforms into insight. The mind, no longer a battlefield, becomes a canvas. Viktor Frankl's reflections on meaning apply here. Life's purpose emerges more clearly when we stop trying to manipulate it through sheer will. Instead of forcing outcomes, we engage with reality as it is. And in doing so, life flows naturally, revealing paths that were previously invisible. Short, impactful sentences punctuate this cinematic journey. You stop fighting. You breathe. You move. Each pause allows the audience to feel the shift as if it is happening within them. The storytelling rhythm mirrors the psychological release. Tension followed by silence, anxiety followed by clarity, chaos followed by flow. This is not merely a philosophical lesson. It is an emotional experience. Transformation also requires embracing imperfection. The figure in the story does not become flawless. They do not suddenly possess perfect control over their emotions or thoughts. Instead, they accept imperfection as part of life's texture. Anger may still arise, fear may still whisper, doubt may still surface, but none of these compel resistance anymore. They are observed, acknowledged, and allowed to pass. This aligns with Jung's vision of individuation. Wholeness arises not from erasing shadows, but from integrating them. Cinematic storytelling further illustrates liberation. Imagine a person walking through a crowded city street, no longer tense, no longer rushing. The noise persists, the chaos remains, but there is a rhythm to their movement. They are no longer reacting. They are participating. Life begins to unfold effortlessly, as though the universe itself recognizes the cessation of inner struggle and responds with clarity, opportunity, and synchronicity. The transformation is ultimately paradoxical. By stopping the fight disappears. By ceasing resistance, we gain momentum. By embracing vulnerability, we find strength. The narrative emphasizes this through contrasting imagery. Past scenes of frantic pacing, clenched fists, and restless nights dissolve into wide, expansive visuals of calm motion, open skies, and steady steps. The audience witnesses and internalizes the liberation that comes from alignment rather than force. By the end of this section, the audience is invited into introspection. They are guided to sense their own resistance, to feel the weight they have carried, and to imagine the release that occurs when it is lifted. This is the cinematic and emotional apex of the script, the moment where theory becomes experience, where philosophical insight transforms into felt truth. Life begins to move not because of effort, but because the internal war has ended. The dawn stretches across the sky, spilling soft golden light across the world. Shadows shrink and the chill of the night retreats, leaving warmth in its place. The figure who once paced restlessly, burdened by inner conflict, now stands quietly, shoulders relaxed, breathing deep and unhurried. The mirror no longer feels alien. The reflection that once seemed hostile or fragmented now holds a trace of understanding, a quiet acknowledgement that the self is not an enemy, but a companion on life's journey. The tension that had once weighed down every movement, every thought, has loosened, leaving space for possibility and growth. Life, which once felt stalled, heavy, and resistant, now hums with subtle, almost imperceptible movement. Integration begins in the smallest, most intimate moments. Walking through a city street, the figure notices things previously invisible. The rhythm of footsteps on pavement, the gentle sway of branches in the wind, the soft hum of conversations drifting through the air. Each sound, each movement, becomes a reflection of the rhythm of life itself, a mirror to the internal landscape that is slowly shifting from chaos to calm. In these ordinary moments, the extraordinary is revealed. Life moves when we stop fighting ourselves. Every step taken, every breath inhaled and exhaled, is a practice in alignment, a quiet celebration of the cessation of struggle. Cinematic close-ups capture the subtle transformations. Fingers brushing leaves, eyes pausing to notice small details, lips curling into a faint but genuine smile. Each gesture, however simple, carries a profound significance. The psychological depth of this realization is profound. Humans resist life because they fear imperfection, loss, and uncertainty. The mind clings to familiar narratives, even when those narratives create suffering. Yet surrendering to reality does not mean weakness or passivity. It means facing the present moment with courage, honesty, and compassionate awareness. Alan Watts often reminded us that the more we try to force life, the more it eludes us. Flow emerges not from relentless effort, but from alignment. Viktor Frankl emphasized that meaning is discovered, not manufactured. When internal war ceases, our perception of the world shifts. The chaos outside remains, but it no longer dictates the motion within. Life itself responds, not because circumstances change, but because the resistance that blocked clarity has been lifted. Contrasts throughout this journey illuminate the magnitude of transformation. The opening image of the figure pacing in a dim room, tense and restless, now mirrors scenes of calm observation and deliberate action. The energy once trapped in internal struggle has been released, allowing life to move naturally. Even challenges and obstacles, which are inevitable in every life, are now met with presence rather than panic, with observation rather than control. The cinematic lens captures these moments. Wide shots of open streets, slow-motion glimpses of natural phenomena, the quiet sway of trees or the ripple of water. Life, once heavy and resistant, flows with rhythm and grace, demonstrating that peace is not found in controlling outcomes, but in aligning with the natural current of existence. The practice of integration involves embracing imperfection fully. Life is never without difficulty, and the self is never entirely free of contradiction. But the struggle against imperfection, which once consumed energy and attention, is transformed into a source of insight and growth. Each mistake, misstep, or burst of fear becomes material for reflection rather than ammunition for self-criticism. Jung's concept of shadow integration reminds us that wholeness emerges not through denial, but through acknowledgement and acceptance. Cinematic storytelling emphasizes this. The figure interacts with others authentically, accepts setbacks with composure, and moves through life with measured confidence. Imperfection is no longer a threat. It is part of the texture of a life fully lived. The reflective narration guides the audience toward internalizing the journey. Life is not about constant victory over oneself, but about ongoing engagement with the self in a spirit of compassion and awareness. Observing resistance without judgment, noticing habitual patterns, and allowing natural flow cultivates a sense of spaciousness, a mental and emotional environment where clarity, creativity, and meaningful action can emerge. Cinematic rhythm complements this reflection. Soft ambient music, lingering pauses, and expansive visual frames create a sensory echo of the calm and presence the narrative describes. Viewers are invited not just to comprehend these insights intellectually, but to feel them in their bodies and minds. The integration extends to everyday relationships and interactions. The person who has stopped fighting themselves approaches others with a renewed sense of patience and empathy. Conflicts no longer provoke automatic resistance, but are met with observation, understanding, and conscious response. The energy previously consumed by self-conflict becomes available for engagement with the world. Opportunities that were once unnoticed or inaccessible now appear with clarity, and choices are made from alignment rather than compulsion. Cinematic sequences capture these moments: a calm conversation, a shared smile, a hand extended in quiet understanding. The external world mirrors the internal transformation. Life begins to move not only within, but also around the individual. The poetic closure of this section emphasizes the universality of the insight. Life flows not through perfection, relentless effort, or constant striving, but through alignment, acceptance, and the courage to stop fighting oneself. The narrative returns to the mirror motif. The reflection radiates calm, understanding, and quiet power. The internal war, once all-consuming, has ended, leaving space for peace, clarity, and authentic action. Cinematic visuals of flowing water, gentle breezes, sunrise, and open skies reinforce the timelessness of this lesson. These images convey that freedom is not something granted externally. It is discovered internally through the release of resistance. Finally, the audience is left with a contemplative invitation to notice where they resist in their own lives, to pause before reacting, to observe thoughts and feelings without judgment, and to allow life to move naturally within and around them. This reflection is not a directive, but an experiential truth, a gentle guide toward internal liberation. The cinematic rhythm slows, lingering on visual metaphors of openness and flow, rivers winding through valleys, clouds drifting effortlessly across a vast sky, sunlight illuminating ordinary details. The reflection of the self, once a source of tension, now becomes a mirror of possibility and grace. The final words resonate like a quiet mantra, echoing the core insight of the entire journey. When you stop fighting yourself, life finally moves. It is a truth both simple and profound, philosophical and psychological, cinematic and deeply human. The moment lingers, inviting the audience to internalize the lesson, feel the release, and recognize that the path to freedom lies not in force or control, but in alignment, acceptance, and the courage to embrace the self fully, shadows, imperfections, and all. In this expanded conclusion, the cinematic story reaches its final resonance. The tension of struggle has dissolved, replaced by a rhythm of flow. The philosophical, psychological, and emotional threads of the narrative converge into a single, timeless insight. Life, once resisted and heavy, moves with clarity and grace. The figure takes a final step forward, a breath drawn fully and calmly, a smile of quiet understanding, a visual representation of what has been learned and felt. Surrendering the internal battle does not mean defeat, it means liberation, and through that liberation, life moves with effortless motion and profound meaning.